We are back with yet another 7-round mock draft for the 2025 NFL Draft. Is this way too early? Absolutely, but it's not too early to start getting acquainted with some of the names that may or may not fall within the purview of the NFL Draft. And guys, I even went so far as to throw in 6 UDFA names on this list. Now, one thing right off the bat to note, I messed up the proportions here. So by adding those 6 names, those 6 UDFA to this list, everything got thrown wonky. So the graphic is a little bit difficult to read here. I will do my best to get that fixed by the next mock draft that I do here. But there are a lot of names here, and I don't think anyone is going to be happy with me, but I think once I get through the reasoning portion of this, maybe it will be easier to understand what I was going for, even if it is unlikely that the draft turns out this way. Round 1, pick 32, running back Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State. Yes, Isaiah Pacheco is the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco will also be in the final season of his rookie deal, and while we did see Brett Veach bring back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it was not for an expensive deal. And yes, I know the last time the Kansas City Chiefs, took a running back in the first round, it did not go as expected. That was, of course, Clyde Edwards-Helaire himself. All that said, Ashton Jeanty is, in my opinion, the second coming of Priest Holmes. 5'9", 210 pounds with an estimated 4.42 40-yard dash, Ashton Jeanty is an absolute powerhouse of a running back. He is great at breaking tackles. He is great at staying on his feet. He is great about being no-nonsense and getting himself upfield. He is also a serious threat in the passing game as well. In my opinion, he is also the number 1 running back in this draft class. Yes, I do believe he will be better than Quinshon Judkins. Yes, I do believe he will be better than Ollie Gordon. Now, we have seen neither Nick Bolton nor Isaiah Pacheco's contracts roll over. We will know a little bit more after this season with those lower leverage type positions, what it is that Brett Veach intends to do once those rookie contracts expire. Nick Bolton has outperformed even his second-round draft grade, and Isaiah Pacheco has certainly outperformed his 7th-round draft slot. But both running back and middle linebacker are considered to be lower leverage positions, so we will see what happens when a guy is going to roll over on that rookie contract and is going to be earning substantially more money than he was during his rookie contract. We've sort of seen a little bit of this with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but remember, the Chiefs declined the 5th-year option on Clyde Edwards-Helaire's rookie contract because he was a first-round pick. Should Jeanty be the pick at 32, he brings a different dynamic to the offense entirely. Everyone hates to keep invoking the ghost of Kareem Hunt, but Jeanty brings a spark of that back. Power running with a speed dynamic, and you can always hit him out of the backfield. He looks incredibly similar to Priest Holmes on the field to me, but that style of game is also there from Kareem Hunt as well. And the only way I really have to sort of describe the dynamic there is that Isaiah Pacheco is a really good athlete, but he's a little bit better of an athlete than he is a football player. Ashton Jeanty is a really good football player, and he's a little bit better of a football player than he is an athlete. And he seems to be a pretty good athlete to boot. Round 2, pick 64, Tre Harris, wide receiver out of Ole Miss, 6'2", 205 pounds, with a 4.4 40, but he started his college career at Louisiana Tech. Now, at this point, the 4.4 40 is a projection, and I'm going to be 100% honest, I don't necessarily see that. When you look at his size, 6'2", 205, it's hard not to immediately think of Rashee Rice. And I think that's almost exactly what he's going to be in the NFL, but I think he has the added dimension of being a downfield threat too. I think that this season for the Kansas City Chiefs could be a great reckoning on the 19 wide receivers that are currently on the roster. This season will be Hollywood Brown's only season as a Kansas City Chief. This year will be likely Kadarius Toney's last season as a Kansas City Chief. I'm not sold on the fact that Sky Moore makes it to the regular season with the Kansas City Chiefs. Mecole Hardman and Justin Watson, this is their final season as well on their current contracts. So even if there isn't a whole lot of fallout this preseason for this position group, it might just be that the Kansas City Chiefs allow a whole lot of contracts to expire and don't bring those players back. The duo of Tre Harris and Rashee Rice could be downright nasty as far as trying to find the right cornerback pairing for those two. When you add Xavier Worthy and his speed to that mix, things become hairy all around. So far in his college career, Tre Harris has a quarterback rating when targeted of 123.1. Now it's easy to write that off as, hey, you're looking at the quality of competition at Louisiana Tech, but you also have to factor in that he would have had a Louisiana Tech type quarterback throwing him the ball as well, so it's not like he had a 5-star recruit dishing out the rock. Round 3, pick 66, Keon Sab, the safety out of Alabama, looks to be about 6'1", 208 with a 4.55 40-yard dash. The Kansas City Chiefs are always looking to bring in talent at the defensive back positions. And 2024 is the final year on safety Justin Reid's contract. He is compared favorably oftentimes to Brian Cook, the Chiefs' current safety out of Cincinnati, though I think that Sab has better speed, and I think Sab he looks more pliable as well. He looks to have better flexibility. Now, this is a projection type pick as he does not have the most starts under his career. He does not have the most snaps under his belt, but when you're looking at the athlete that steps onto the field and if he is able to be consistently what it is that he has shown, he should be around a 3rd round pick. So this is probably not the biggest value here, but you and I both know that Brett Veach is not afraid to spend a 3rd round pick on a defensive back, and they will be replacing Justin Reid if they decide to let him walk in free agency. Maybe the biggest knock on Sab at this point would be that while he does look pretty good at everything, while he does a very good job at minimizing weaknesses in his game, I'm not sure he has a terribly high ceiling. I think that you're getting an absolutely phenomenal floor on Keon Sab, but in my opinion, he has yet to show a particularly high ceiling. Now, that could all come out of the woodwork this season, as he is projected to get a whole lot more playing time with Alabama. And while he does get a lot of comparisons to Brian Cook, he kind of reminds me more of Juan Thornhill, the Juan Thornhill that we had in Kansas City that was always good, always sort of in the right place at sort of the right time, and always seemed sort of on the precipice of taking that next step, but never actually took that next developmental step and come up with all the big plays, right? And with Juan Thornhill, it almost always felt as if he just needed to get the experience, but even as he was getting more and more experience, we talk about this a lot with current Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs seem to be able to find a player's ceiling relatively quickly and keep him performing there. If Keon Sab has done that, and this is his ceiling, he's probably still a third-round pick. Is he an early third-rounder, as in 66th overall? Maybe not. If he can find more upside than that, then this is maybe a good range for him. I don't know that I've seen it in him to become, for example, a second-rounder. Round 3, pick 96, defensive tackle Walter Nolan, 6'4", 290 pounds with a projected 4.95, 40-yard dash out of Ole Miss, yet again in this draft. It is my opinion, as we have seen Brett Veach do with the offensive line, as we have seen Brett Veach do with the wide receiver position, and as we have seen Brett Veach do numerous times with the defensive backs, both cornerback and safety. Eventually, he's going to get frustrated with his inability to figure out exactly what he has to do to get a quality starter next to Chris Jones, and he's going to start throwing darts. And I think he's going to take the Nate Diaz approach, punches in bunches. If you look on here, there are 2 defensive tackles to be drafted, Walter Nolan and then another in the 5th round. And guys, that might not seem like punches in bunches, but they only have one other starting spot because Chris Jones is absolutely 100,000% going to be the other starter. So to spend both a 3rd and a 5th round pick on a particular position is sort of the same thing as all of the picks they threw at the offensive line in this past draft, all the picks they threw at defensive back in the Trent McDuffie draft, etc. As you would expect with a 6'4" defensive tackle, sometimes he gets off balance, sometimes he shoots up out of his stance too quick, but it's a good thing he would have Chris Jones right next to him to assist in his coaching out of that habit. And no, he is not Chris Jones, but he is a Chris Jones type defensive tackle. He is agile and he is hostile. Mobile? Well, he's getting there. He has a good first step, and he has some power. And this is the type of defensive tackle that can make you regret having to double-team Chris Jones. But you will still have to double Chris Jones. Now, with his size and build, there is the inevitable question, is he more Chris Jones or Matt Dickerson? While I do believe he is closer to the Matt Dickerson end of the scale, there aren't too many players that are closer to the Chris Jones end of the scale. Is he a great value pick as a top 100 selection? I'm not sure at this point. But when you take a step back and you start to look at this draft, Ashton Jeanty would be a year 2 starter at running back if Isaiah Pacheco goes. Trey Harris could start at the 3rd wide receiver spot, in my opinion. Keon Sab, I don't know if he's a first-year starter, and then Walter Nolan could be a starter next to Chris Jones, so you were looking at 3 starters in 4 picks with a likely role player in the least in Keon Sab. Round 4, pick 129, Jack Nelson, the 6'7", 311-pound offensive tackle out of Wisconsin. Yes, another offensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs in the sort of upper half of the draft. So far, Nelson has started 39 games and accrued 2,362 snaps of offense. It strikes me that his ceiling is likely right tackle, but that does not mean that his floor is backup tackle. Though he is tall at 6'7" for offensive guard, I think if you are looking for a guy that is going to be a pass blocking specialist at the offensive guard position, Jack Nelson could slide in there and make hay on the interior offensive line. Now, this is not to say that he is bad in the running game. He's not. In fact, he has a chip on his shoulder. He is a bit of a nasty guy, which seems to be what the Kansas City Chiefs are valuing in offensive linemen at this point. But that is a little bit different at the offensive tackle position in the Big Ten versus being an offensive guard and having those big uglies lined up right across from you in the NFL. He seems to me like the kind of guy that could come in and year one hold down one of the offensive guard positions and end up transitioning out to the offensive tackle spot once he's a little more comfortable in the game. I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to continue to add talent at the offensive line positions. Pick 129, Jack Nelson is a player that has an awfully high floor to be available at that spot. Again, this is maybe a player that does not have quite the ceiling one would hope for at some point in the draft, but he has a floor that means he will definitely be on your 53-man roster as a rookie. And this is sort of ironically a transition back to the old Andy Reid way of saying things. Andy Reid used to say you'll put your best 5 on the field regardless of position. You'll figure it out from there. Well, the Kansas City Chiefs have started drafting more position-specific offensive linemen. Creed Humphrey at center, for example. Lucas Niang was definitely not an offensive guard. Trey Smith was one of those guys that reportedly had upside at right tackle coming out of college. I don't know that we have seen that at any point in the NFL. He is just such a bread and butter offensive guard. And then you bring in Wanye Morris, who is a really violent offensive tackle. You bring in Kingsley Suamataia, who is a really heavy-handed offensive tackle. And you bring in here Jack Nelson, who is a really aggressive offensive tackle. And you've got three guys for 2 spots. The quote-unquote loser of the group who does not get an offensive tackle spot could absolutely play the guard position, meaning that 3 of your 5 are just sort of the best offensive linemen you have, despite the fact that they are not the absolute offensive guards that you've spent some time drafting and developing the past few years. Round 5, pick 159, we have Thor Griffith, the defensive tackle out of Louisville, goes 6'2", 305 pounds. Never bad to have a Thor on the team. Thor Griffith is, in my estimation, about as Derek Nottie as it gets. He is a powerful guy, a guy whose power is actually knocking around a weight class above where it is that he weighs in. He is a strong run defender. He is an aggressive defensive tackle. He is a high motor defensive tackle. He has actually 11 sacks over the past 2 years. I am not sure, however, that translates into the NFL, because a lot of I don't think he's going to be able to bully NFL offensive guards the way he bullies in college offensive guards, to the tune of 37 total pressures in 2022 and 29 pressures in 2023. The Chiefs have, to this point in Derek Notty's career, had a terrible time trying to get better than Derek Notty at the defensive tackle position, and I'm not sure Thor Griffith will ever be better than Derek Notty, but I think that he could be essentially Derek Notty, and you're getting him here at the 159th overall pick. And if it is a 5th round draft pick contract that allows you to finally walk away from constantly re-signing Derek Notty to 1-year deals, that's not a bad thing. Derek Notty has perhaps underperformed initial expectations for him, but has made a good career for himself in the NFL nonetheless. He has never been someone that cost the Kansas City Chiefs an arm and a leg to keep around, and he has never been an embarrassment on the field for the Chiefs, which is difficult to find at the defensive tackle position. And again, I think they're going to start throwing numbers at the defensive tackle position in order to just try to find something to work long-term next to Chris Jones. Moving on to round 7, pick 198, Fentrell Cypress, either the 2nd or the 3rd. I can't figure it out because everywhere I find it seems to be something. I believe he is the 2nd, not the 3rd, but some of these mock draft websites or the mock draft simulators have him listed as a 3rd. Now, Fentrell started his college career at Virginia and is this season moving to Florida State. Last season moved to Florida State. 6 feet tall, 187 pounds, is expected to run a 4.4 40-yard dash. Apparently had a 37.5-inch vertical while in high school. He's a really good athlete. He reminds me a little bit of Marcus Peters. He's maybe a little bit better against the run. He's maybe not quite as instinctive, but he does have all of the tools to be those things. I don't know that Cypress will ever be a starting corner in the NFL, but I think he's definitely going to be one of these guys who hangs around the NFL for a very long time. I say he's a liability against the run. I don't think he's unwilling in run support. I think that he's a bad tackler. On the plus side, he has all of the measurables you need, and he seems to oscillate in his college career, having a bad season, maybe not a bad season, a less than ideal season, and a better season, a less than ideal season, and a better season. So if it is just sort of how he is learning the game to step ladder his way up, then it might be that he has a higher ceiling than I am granting here. Other than that, he's a guy that I think has some staying power in the NFL, and he might even be one of those guys that's constantly, for example, the 4th cornerback, but every time he gets on the field, he just sort of seems to make a play. I just don't know if the consistency is there to really trust him. And then the final draft pick, round 7, pick 214, Telek Lockett, an offensive guard who goes 6'4", 330 pounds, out of Texas State by way of Louisiana Monroe. Lockett is, in my opinion, unlikely to come out after this, his junior season in college, but if he does and he is turning pro after his junior season at Texas State, it would mean that 6'4", 330-pound frame was doing an awful lot of damage. And when he was a freshman, he started the first 5 games of his career, including a game against Texas and a game against Alabama. That is getting thrown out to the Wolves if ever there was one. Or an example of getting thrown out to the Wolves if ever there was one. And then last season in 2023, he started all 12 games at right guard, racking up 679 snaps. Not a whole lot I could find on Lockett, but he seems to be a powerful guy. I think he's going to have a pretty good arm length number. I think it's going to be above the average for a 6'4" guy. He looks strong to me. He looks like he has a good base, a good anchor. And at 214 overall, I think he's a guy that I think he is definitely good enough to be a backup offensive guard in the NFL, which if you're getting that at pick 214 overall, you're absolutely winning that pick. And I think he has upside as a starter in the NFL. Then, starting on the UDFA, Mack Moore was sitting there in the ranks of the UDFA, the safety out of Alabama, 6 feet tall, 198 pounds, projected to run a 4.5 40-yard dash. I do not think he will be. I think that he was poorly rated by the mock draft simulation that I used. I think he's absolutely going to be drafted. I think that he is absolutely... I don't think he's better than Keon Sab, but that might be because while I believe that neither does Mack Moore have elite speed in the way that I do not think Keon Sab is going to have elite speed, I think that Keon Sab is better in run support, which you have to do. You have to be that guy if you're not going to be the speed guy. There's different roles for different players on defense, but that said, if he's sitting there as an undrafted rookie free agent, go ahead and pick him up and see if you can figure it out from there. And there's the two starting safeties for Alabama. One of them is going to be good. If you end up with both of them, you get to figure it out. Then Tony Grimes, the 6-foot-tall, 190-pound cornerback out of UNLV, who is projected to run a 4.3 flat 40-yard dash. If Grimes really is 6 foot tall, if he really does weigh 190 pounds, if he really does run a 4.3 flat 40, he's absolutely going to be drafted, despite the fact that there are some holes in his game. He's not great against the run. He's not great at getting off blocks, and he seems to have lapses in judgment. He gave up a QB rating when targeted of 93.4 as a sophomore. He gave up a QB rating when targeted of 97.3 as a junior. Maybe it's lapses in judgment. Maybe he needs better coaching. Maybe he doesn't study his playbook. Look, you don't know what it is. That's absolutely why you do the interviews. But there's no doubt in my mind that if a 6-foot-tall, 190-pound cornerback that runs a 4.3 flat 40 is just sitting out there in the ranks of the UDFA, Brett Veach is going to have something to do with how that story ends. Then Zion Young, 6'6", 265-pound edge out of Mizzou by way of Michigan State. This is the second year in a row, if this draft goes as I have projected it here, that the Kansas City Chiefs have not taken an edge player in the draft. I do not think that will be the case. I believe they will probably draft one, but the way that this board fell, there was never one of value there. Now, Zion Young is... I'm not sure how I feel about Zion Young. If he does anything, and I mean basically, literally anything, for the Missouri Tigers this season, he's going to be a drafted guy. If he has any type of measurables, he's going to get drafted. 6'6", 265, and he looks the part. He gets off the bus, and you know that's a football player. This coaching staff for the Missouri Tigers seems to be especially talented when it comes to the defensive line. And if they are able to get Zion Young to live up to his potential, I think worst case scenario, you've got a guy who is a 7th rounder. But if this type of frame is sitting out there in free agency, I think the Chiefs will be all over it. Also, Spencer Brown, offensive tackle out of Oklahoma, 6'6", 321 pounds. went to Oklahoma out of, guess where? Michigan State. 12 games and 11 starts, at Michigan State in 2023, 783 snaps. And guys, if Missouri has a good defensive line coaching staff, the Oklahoma Sooners have a great offensive line coaching staff. This is really just sort of projection. If he does start this season at offensive tackle for the Oklahoma Sooners, probably he finds his way into the NFL in one way, shape, form, fashion, facet, or manner or another. I do think he has pretty high upside. I think that the foot speed, in my opinion, we need to see a little bit of improvement there. But this guy is a guy that can absolutely hang around the NFL for a little while. Then we've got two interesting wide receiver prospects here at the end. Chris Brizell, wide receiver, 6'5", 215 pounds out of Tennessee. Savion Williams, wide receiver, 6'5", 212 pounds out of TCU, projected to run a 4.45 40-yard dash. Savion Williams is on Feldman's Freaks list, and though Feldman seems to make these numbers up sometimes because they do not translate at all to the NFL Combine, apparently he has a 10-foot 6-inch broad jump, which isn't the greatest number in the world, and a 40-inch vertical leap. 40-inch vertical leap, in addition to being 6'5", is a pretty good trick. Savion Williams plays wide receiver like a tight end, which is sad because I don't think he has to do that. Brizell is an interesting case study transferring to Tennessee from Tulane. He redshirted his freshman season, ended up last year having 44 receptions for 711 yards and 5 touchdowns. If he does end up coming out early, it would be after a very impressive season for the Tennessee Volunteers. And guys, if I'm 100% honest, wide receivers who are 6'5", 215 pounds, I'm just trying to find Denario Alexander. No one knew Denario Alexander was going to be Denario Alexander in the NFL in the snaps that he had, except for Mizzou fans, because Denario Alexander was never anything but Denario Alexander while he was on the field at Mizzou. And in the back of my mind, somewhere, at some point, there is still a Denario Alexander to be had. Guys, that's what I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on the channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.